So, as part of our leadership series and conversations about CEOs and coaching, one of the things that I want to talk today is about reducing stress, which is a big issue, and also delegation, and how those things combined come together to help improve and increase productivity. And I thought of no one better than my own coach to invite to talk about it. So, Coach Snezana, welcome, and thanks for joining me again.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me again. I truly enjoy our chats. So hopefully our listeners are going to have a blast with this and learn something from it.
So I don't think I've ever seen you stressed. And if I have seen you stressed, you do a really good job in hiding it. I don't. I wear it on my face, and a lot of the people that work with me know when I'm stressed, but I'm getting better at it. Stress is a big topic for a lot of leaders, particularly at the top. It's very lonely at the top, and you can internalize or externalize your stress, but dealing with it is really important. What's been your perspective as a coach with leaders that have stress, and some techniques or methods beyond cliche to help manage that stress?
Yeah, let me stop you right there and ask quickly, what do you mean by cliche? What is a cliche for you?
No, by cliche, I mean cliche strategies. We all get told, hey, if you're stressed out, go for a walk, don't overthink it. But, I think there is an importance in these simple things, doing the simple things right. But as a coach, you're also trained to implement certain techniques and trained to go further than just telling people what to do.
Yeah, just breathe. I think that's the first thing everybody says. Yeah, as you said it, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of leaders deal with stress on a daily basis, and it can be personal, it can be professional. The more team members you have, I believe the harder it gets to let go of stress because you're constantly worrying about the business, the people, where things are going to go. And there, the first strategy is actually to get clarity. This is what most people have in mind when they tell you to breathe. But when somebody tells you to breathe and you're very stressed out, it doesn't really help. So the strategy that I usually start with is clarity. What does that mean? That means we look into, okay, well, why do you feel overwhelmed? Why do you feel like you can't make any decisions in a proper way? Why do you feel like you've been making wrong decisions? Why do you feel paralyzed? So, depending on how the person feels and what stress actually does to the person, some people are, when they're stressed, they just paralyze, they stop. Some people like to do a gazillion other things so that they feel productive, and that's how they try to get out of it. Some people procrastinate a lot. So there are differences in how you show that you're under stress. But the first thing really is to see what's going on. And the best way to see what's going on is to stop and write down everything that's happening. And I usually make people write it down because as you're writing it down, you get to see it actually. Because as you're thinking through, it's still your thoughts, you're still in your head, and it's really hard to get that big picture that you need. But if you have it all written down on a huge chart or a piece of paper, and you can actually look at what's going on, very quickly you realize that there are a lot of things that you're concerned about, but they're not a priority, or they're not such a big of a deal, or, it depends on what the situation is. Another thing we do, so once you actually write everything down, once you get a clear view of what's going on, and let's say what you have happening in the business or what's going on with the team, whatever is stressing you out, then we look at it and we see, okay, what does this mean? How is this going to proceed? Where are you with this particular thing? Sometimes what happens is when we procrastinate, we keep making stories in our head. We keep seeing scenarios that are happening or that should be happening. And usually, what happens there is that your story is a lot worse than the situation really is. And so, with writing it down, with looking at it sort of like facts, you start to realize that, oh, well, maybe that's not such a big of a deal, or oh, maybe there's a smaller step that I can take. So to kind of wrap it up as I go all over the place, the first thing is to stop and write down what's going on. The second thing is to decide your priorities if there are many things that you're working on. And then the third thing would be, what's the smallest step that you can make today to get started? And usually that doesn't make stress go away,
Yep.
but it does make you feel more in control. And
It's
that's the only thing we can do to get started. And then of course, depending on the stress levels and what influenced it and where it's all coming from, sometimes I suggest talking to a therapist or another professional. Sometimes we create a plan and we work on it. But this would be the first step. So that's my kind of go-to strategy to actually see what we're dealing with.
for many people that haven't been coached, that have maybe had some mentoring, or no doubt a lot of leaders have gone through the process of talking to people and building these skills that you talk about. For me, just listening to what you're saying, and from my own personal experience, I think it's important to let people know that clarity that you talk about is a process, right? It's not an instant thing that you tick off a list, but it's an ongoing process, which allows you to reduce your stress over time. Just maybe provide some insights to people that haven't been coached or haven't worked with a coach as to what that process looks like and how that is implemented into a coaching regime.
Right. So clarity, you're right. Clarity is not something that you just get and you're done with. It's kind of like a lifelong thing that you do, because clarity really means having a clear idea on what your goals are, or what your next step is, or what you would like to achieve in the next little while or in the next long while. But it doesn't mean knowing every single move that you're going to make. It just means knowing what the expected outcomes are. And then as you move along the way, you learn how to tackle it. So clarity really deals with why this matters to me. Why do I want to do this? And then what is it that I really want to do? But the how, you learn the how along the way. Because
Mm.
as you grow as a leader, as you grow as a person, you acquire new skills. Those skills enable you to do other things. So for people who haven't had any experience with coaching, the first step really is just to write down everything you want to do. That doesn't mean that once it's on the paper, your stress is gone, you feel, brand new, you can go and do everything you want to. No, it just means that now you have a list.
Mm.
Now you have something concrete that you can work at, and you can work with and deal with. So that's step one. And then you may write everything down and you're still like, I have no idea what to start with. I
Yeah.
have no idea where to go with this. In that situation, I would suggest to look at, okay, well, are there any emergencies? Because we want to deal with emergencies first and get rid of them. If there are no emergencies, then my question would be, well, what are you most passionate about? And then you choose the activity or the goal that you're most passionate about, and you create a plan around it. As you create a plan around it, you may realize that you are passionate about it, but it's not practical. You can't execute on it. You need so much more knowledge to be able to get there, etc. So the first thing is to choose one. I heard this really good advice. I believe it was in one of the podcasts, but um, the person said, you cast a wide net. And then once something catches, you exploit it. So he calls it explore and exploit. So the explored part is you actually see all the possible things that you can do, or everything that's of interest to you. And then whatever catches on, you drill down. You see what you can do with it. You create a plan. And if the plan makes sense, you execute.
Yeah.
And then you see what happens. But this, mind you, we're talking about this in steps, but these steps can take months to realize, or to actually come true, or for you to figure out, well, I've done a month research. It doesn't look like I can do this. Okay. All right. Well, next thing. If this doesn't work, let's focus on the next thing. But the important thing is that you're learning as you go, but
Yep.
you still have that list of things that you're working on. Does that make sense? Does
Yeah,
that make it a little
definitely.
clear?
I'm listening to this and I can definitely relate to it. And, when we started this conversation, I said beyond the cliche, because it's really annoying sometimes when people say to you, when you are stressed and you're being told to breathe, breathing definitely can help reduce your stress, but it is a technique. Right. It is a coping technique. Beyond that technique, there's an underlying reason. And one of the reasons I'm doing these podcasts and dedicating so much time is because I know how powerful coaching can be to address those underlying issues which cause the stress. And then what happens is that stress manifests itself into what you say, into passion projects and into things that you're excited about. And you can go from being hyper stressed to being hyper excited again. And how does that balance work? Because I know you and I have worked on that together, and very early on, you told me to find the excitement factors that were important in order to provide that balance. Maybe we can go into that a little bit and why having that excitement back is really important.
Absolutely. So most leaders, they start their business or a passion project because they're excited about it. They want to solve a problem, they want to help people, they want to offer more, but there's a reason they found a pain point and they're excited about solving that problem. But what happens along the way is you get more responsibility, you realize that, maybe you need funding, you need this and that, and it all becomes more of a transaction, an obligation, something you have to do because maybe somebody's paycheck depends on it or the future of your company depends on it. That's a huge stress to put on a person. And I know we're dealing with it, but it's a lot to put on somebody. So what we forget along the way is we forget how to play.
Mm.
We forget why we started at the first place. And so remembering that excitement actually sometimes really helps reduce the stress on its own because you remember how you started. You remember why you thought that was important. And when you remember how you have fun, why you enjoy doing this, why you were so crazy to go into this madness of entrepreneurship to actually get something done, you get back that feeling of, oh no, okay, this is a responsibility, it's a big deal, but I want to do this. And I want to do it because XYZ. But remembering your why
Yeah.
brings back the kind of the child in us. But we forget to play. And a lot of what we do is play. We experiment a lot in the business.
Does the excitement also come out through that clarity process? Because I know it did for me when we went through that process together of, you know, finding clarity to reduce the stress. That excitement came out by knowing and pinpointing the things.
Absolutely. One of the first things we focus on is why. Why did you decide to do this? What prompted you to get into this whole story? And often a coach doesn't know you. So we're naturally curious to learn why you're where you are, what makes you excited about this, what you love about this. And usually people, when they're stressed, it's really hard for you to see why you're excited about something. So we talk about why this matters to you. And if it doesn't matter now, or if it feels like it doesn't matter now, why did you start in the first place? And so we take you back to, okay, can you remember the first year of your business or the first few years, the first success of the business? How did that feel? What did you, and usually people are, when they remember, they get really excited about the success or, the first breakthrough, maybe the first client, depending on who you're dealing with. And then you can see it in their faces. You see the smile, you see the shoulders kind of go down. They naturally relax because they're putting themselves back in that period when there was a lot of stress, but it was still a lot of excitement. And once they feel that, then they get to explain, oh, but it matters to me because of XYZ. This is why it's important for me to keep going. And then that's where we stop. That's where it's like, okay, now that you have that, which of all of these activities would be the first step to actually help you achieve your initial goal, if the goal is still relevant, which is something we question as well. Because it may be that you're 10 years into your business, you feel stuck, you feel stressed, and you don't know why. The first thing we'll look at, okay, well, your goal, is that still relevant? Has something changed? And if it has, okay, well, can we redefine so that your expectations actually meet what's going on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, pushing that further and thinking about some of the reasons why that stress builds at an unhealthy level and beyond clarity is because as leaders, we take everything onto our shoulders and we pack on and we pack on. And as you grow, you pack on more and more. And then comes the next point, which is the importance of delegation. And we all know we need to delegate. It's taught to us in business schools, and there's no shortage of YouTube videos that tell you delegate. I want to touch on delegation and how coaching can help improve a leader's delegation skills. How does coaching in particular help someone come to that realization through finding clarity?
Look, once we start exploring what you're doing, what your position in the business is, what your goals are, what your tasks as a leader are, sooner rather than later, you realize that you're doing too much. And usually people are very aware of this anyway,
Yeah.
but as you're exploring, oh, these are my tasks, this is what I need to get done, this is my deadline, I need to meet with these partners, whatever is on the list, as you're talking about it, you start realizing, oh, maybe somebody can help me out with this. But then it's still really hard to make that step, because what's happening is you grow this business. This is your baby. It's really hard to let go of that feeling that what you do is best. And even though on a conscious level, we know that we need to let go, because there's no other way that a business is going to grow. In order for you to think about strategy, somebody else needs to do the operations. But on a subconscious level, we struggle to let go, because maybe that other person is not going to do a good job, or maybe it's not going to be just like we imagined. So then what we look at and what we work with is, okay, so what's important? Is it important for the business to keep growing, or is it important to be just like you want it to be?
Yeah.
And if you can get both, that's wonderful. But if not, which, we're all different people, maybe somebody has a different way of performing a task, but you still get the same result. So what's more important for you? And then we start small. You always have to start small. Even with delegating, the first task you delegate, it should be something that's small, that's easy for you to delegate. It's kind of like forming habits. You start with something small. You're not going to run a marathon the first day you start running. You're going to run maybe 2 kilometers. The same thing with delegating. So I don't know if I answered your question, but when we pile things up, because we forget the more responsibility we get, we need to start letting go of something. But we forget that part because we're too busy. And usually another reason people don't delegate on time is because it's easier for me to do it than to teach somebody else to do it, because it's going to take less time.
Yeah.
But what we don't realize is, yes, it's going to take more time now to train somebody, but in the long run, you're going to train this person and then you can move on. Whereas the more you have to do it, it's going to be, oh, another task on the list, another operational thing that I have to get done, because nobody else knows. And nobody else knows because I don't have time to train them. So it's like a vicious circle of a chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah, you're kind of digging yourself further and further into the hole, rather than climbing out when it isn't too deep and it's shallow. And I think with delegation, one of the beautiful things that comes through coaching and becoming better at delegating is you start to realize that your way is not necessarily the best way. You start to realize that you're probably not as good as you think you are. And when you allow and empower other people to do the things that you were doing, it actually truly creates a different culture. It really creates a different experience in which you, as a leader, can be proud. Just like, allowing your children to be themselves and letting go sometimes, and then they grow into adults or they grow into, different people where you can be proud. I think, I've learned that delegating is a process. It's a process of letting go, but then a process of realizing that you're not as good as you think you are, and that there's a beauty in other people doing it their way and in a different way. I wanted to ask you a few more questions, but we're running a little bit short on time, and I have to. That's a good excuse for me to bring you back because we've touched on a few topics, but they've been so important, and there's so many more areas. I want to put a bow on it and just ask you, for someone that's watching this, and may have been a bit stressed out, may have been a little bit unsure about their ability to delegate and the productivity that they're getting in their work. What are some pieces of advice, practical pieces of advice that someone can implement today as a coach to a business leader?
My first question would be, what are you doing? What does your week look like? So write down every single task that you do in a week and see whether there are some things that you can start delegating. The smallest thing, and then start with the smallest thing. So that would be something where I would start with a client anyway. We would look at your week as a whole and all the activities you're involved with. And then if there's a team, is there somebody who can take over some of your activities or tasks? If so, who is that person? How is that process going to look? How much time do you need to train this person to take over? And if you don't have time, usually people are, well, it's 2 minutes and I can do it in 2 minutes. And then it would take me an hour to teach this person. And I go, okay, do it. Do a video as you do it. Let the other person try. So there are ways for you to start, but my advice would be, first of all, awareness. Be aware of how much you're doing. Even the smallest task, like paying a bill, that's still something that you can delegate. So start with writing down everything you do in a week. Look at that list, see whether there's something you can get rid of, and think about who the person to delegate this to could be. And then you do the process.
Awesome. And I think, my advice to people listening from a mentor's perspective is, if it can't be delegated and if it's causing you so much stress and anxiety, maybe that's a good point to stare at yourself in the mirror and think about where your business is going. Do you really have a business, or do you have a job that you hate and that you can't turn into a business? So this exercise, the ability to delegate, to train others and get them to do it better than you, is a really good first sign whether you're on the right track or not. Coach, thank you very much. It's been lovely to talk to you. We have to do this more often. And I just want to, again, say I'm very grateful for the work, for the advice, and, the encouragement and the techniques that you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to chat more. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'll take you up on that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Have a good day.